Oh, hi there! Welcome to another episode of the Okanagan Gardener and Forager. Today I'm going to talk to you about a source of vitamin C in the winter, and it can also be used to help with respiratory ailments. Pine needle tea. Later on in the video I plan to make pine needle tea a couple ways. One way with making it as a tea, boiling water and pouring it over pine needles, letting it steep for a little while, and the other way is a decoction where you actually slow simmer the needles. But before I go any further, I need to tell you the pine tree that I'm going to be talking about is Ponderosa Pine. And this is a somewhat controversial topic because Ponderosa Pine is described by many as toxic. And there's a lot of different sources out there saying that it is. So please, before going any further, I hope you remember, hope you'll know that I am not a doctor and this is not medical advice. And I'm going to read you something from this book, which is one of my favorites, just to make sure that we're all covered here. Some say that Ponderosa Pine makes the best pine tea, whereas others say that it is the most potentially toxic. And more, a warning. Large amounts of pine tea can be toxic, and extended use irritates the kidneys. Pregnant cows that eat Ponderosa Pine needles may abort their calves in 2 days to 2 weeks. Pregnant women should not drink this tea. This is a great book, by the way. I really like it. So there's a number of studies that have been done where generally, or more or less, what happened was cows ate a bunch of Ponderosa Pine needles and they did have some abortions of their calves. So, warning, some people say Ponderosa Pine needle tea is toxic. Now, I'm going to some length to try to make sure everybody knows that Ponderosa Pine needle tea is potentially toxic, partly because I made a video about Ponderosa Pine some time ago, and I was surprised at how mad a lot of people got at me, and which is, I don't know, I was surprised by it. So I still stand by that video, and I think maybe there's in need of a little bit more nuance in the discussion. So as a part of that discussion, I'm going to talk about a few other common plants that actually could, in certain doses, cause a lot of problems. One would be some green vegetables like Swiss chard and beet greens and like spinach, because they're high in oxalic acid. And what could happen if you have too many of them, you could have all sorts of potential health problems, including but not limited to kidney stones, abdominal pain, bloating, low blood pressure, convulsions, tremors, and more. And another common thing that you could have that could lead to issues if you have too much of it is coffee. And I'm not going to start bashing coffee. I love coffee. But if you have too much coffee, like in coffee in the right doses, has all kinds of potential health benefits and more, like tastes great and gives you some energy. But if you have too much, you could have some negative effects like nervousness, irritability, stomach cramps, heart palpitations, and muscle tremors. And you know what? Another thing that in the wrong doses that could lead to problems is water. So if you have too much water, did you know that if you have too much water, what could happen is it can lead to intoxication, diluting salt in the blood, leading to impaired brain function and possibly death. So, what am I saying here? Well, I suppose certainly part of the consideration is the dosage. I'm standing kind of in a Ponderosa Pine tree here, and it actually has there's a bunch of edible uses for Ponderosa Pine, but I'm only talking about the pine needle tea today and some of the medicinal uses for it. Interestingly, or the reason I was thinking about Ponderosa Pine is I noticed there's a lot of people who are sick right now. And it seems like it's kind of a big problem. The hospitals and schools are having some challenges. It's 2022 right now, but there doesn't seem as much attention in the media about it right now for some reason. Anyway, medicinal uses for pine needle tea, that got me thinking. There was a study in 2018 by the Journal of the American Medical Association, I think it is, and what it was about, among other things, or largely was about, it found that There are some 200, more than 200 commonly used medications in the United States that can, as a side effect of them, side effects that are included are, among others, depression and suicidal ideation. And the authors of the study found that those medications did, in fact, lead to increases in depression and suicidal ideation. And these are regular medications, a lot of them, things like ibuprofen, acetaminophen, and birth control. So, what I'm saying about all of this is there are potential effects, risks of almost anything. And to me, I think dosage is very important. So, what we're talking about today, we're not talking about eating a whole bunch of Ponderosa Pine needles, like in those studies like those cows did. We're talking about making a tea or a decoction from the needles in a limited basis. And always, what I hope you'll remember, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. But maybe you do. I'm going to try it, and you can watch, and I'll let you know what I think. But before I get to that, let me show you a little bit about Ponderosa Pine, and I'll tell you why you might want to make a tea out of it. Ponderosa Pine, scientific name is Pinus ponderosa. They can get pretty tall, these short ones here in the foreground, and as they get taller, what they do, like these ones here, something that happens is the lower branches start to self-prune. So you can see the trunks at the bottom start to get bare and they fall off on their own. And how you can identify it, a few ways. They have tufts of needles, usually at kind of the ends of the branches. And what they usually have is the needles are in groups of 3, and they're long, maybe 10 to 25 centimeters long. The bark can break off in like these jigsaw puzzle pieces like this. As it gets older, it becomes really deeply fissured or furrowed, cracks. It's thick. This tree, one of the things about it is it can survive forest fires really well. And in the summer or when it's hot, right now it doesn't really have much smell, but it can, when they're hot, it kind of has like a vanilla smell to the bark. And the cones, if you look, I think you can see at the tips there, they have a little spike sticking out. Cone from the side. Ponderosa pine needle tea has a bunch of medicinal uses. Other pines in this area that could have similar uses include lodgepole, limber pine, and whitebark pine. Now, some of the medicinal uses for Ponderosa pine needle tea are that it is high in vitamin A and C, and you could use the needles to make a tea or a tincture. And some of the uses or some of the reasons you might want to do that include that it can be used as an expectorant. So that means it helps you to cough things up, and that can help with opening up the sinuses, breaking up phlegm, and helping to clear the lungs. The needle tea has also been used as a mild diuretic, and it can help heal urinary tract infections. And the needles have a warming and drying effect, so they can help dry excessive mucus and relieve respiratory infections, coughing, and sore throats. And maybe a more dubious or questionable use for the Ponderosa pine needles is that it has been used for relieving dandruff by taking the needle points and poking them into the scalp to, in quotation marks here, kill the germs. Just a couple more things to say about Ponderosa pine before I go and collect some. It does have quite a bit of history of use by indigenous groups in the areas where you can find it, both for like eating it, edible uses, and medicinal uses. And another thing that I'll say about Ponderosa Pine is it is not very shade tolerant compared to another tree species that is often found near it, like Douglas fir, and and largely because of a lot of the forestry practice now of preventing forest fires, Ponderosa pine is getting outcompeted in a lot of areas by those more shade tolerant Douglas fir. So what I'm going to do as a part of an ethical harvest, I'm going to try to harvest needles from taller, more established trees, leave the younger ones alone, and spread it out among the trees, not taking too many from any one. Here are my pine needles cleaned up, ready to go. I'm just going to cut off the tips, or try to. And what my plan is, I'm just going to do half and half. I haven't measured them, but half. Just cut in half so I can fit them in the pot. Those are the ones that I'm going to make the decoction with. And these ones are the ones I'll steep. I'm chopping them up a little more. And then just giving them a bit of a bruising to get a little bit more of the juices going. Here I've got two waters on the go. This one here is going to be the decoction. That'll cook for a longer time. And here, the water almost boiling, I decided to transfer to the French press. We'll see how good my timing is. Alright, boiling water. I'm going to put it in here and let it steep for 15 minutes. And this is just starting to boil. So I'm going to turn it down to a low simmer for the decoction. I'll let that go for 15 minutes. Okay, 15 minutes are up. See how I do in my pouring. Alright, that's the decoction. And here's the tea. Well, you can definitely see there's a big difference in the color. Tea is not very dark at all. The decoction is pretty cloudy. And I know these glass choices aren't the best, but I wanted them to be clear so you could see it. But I don't have a handled one, so, you know. Alright, taste test time. Here's the pine needle tea. Pretty mild flavor. I love the smell. Inside the house now it smells like pine, which smells great if you ask me. And here's the decoction. More flavor. I thought they would both have more bitter taste. This one tastes almost like a slight sweetness to it. It's pretty good. The tea is like almost doesn't have hardly has any flavor at all, but the decoction actually tastes pretty good, pretty darn good. And if I do manage to post this video, then I think that means I've survived. And like I said before, maybe if the idea of having Ponderosa pine tea is too disturbing for you, then maybe don't do it. But if you want to, you could try this. And how about leave a comment, let me know what you think. And if you're really mad about the idea that that I've made Ponderosa Pine needle tea, then go ahead and leave a comment and tell me. But try to make it nice if you could. And if you made it this far, well then, thanks for watching.